Okay, welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to go on to the next part of the 1999 marginal costing question, and that is part D. And part D says the selling price the company must charge per unit in 1999 if fixed costs are increased by 10%, but the volume of sales and the profit remain the same. So every time I do one of these types of questions where they ask you to find the selling price, so anytime they ask you to find the selling price, I like to use an algebra approach to solving or to finding the answer. Now there are, again, lots of different ways to get to the answers in these, but specifically I prefer every time I see a question asking for the selling price, I use algebra. So we'll be needing this original marginal costing statement again in a moment, so I'm going to just put that up there and we'll start on part D here. And in order to use algebra, we're going to focus on using one particular equation as such. And this is the equation without figures, but it's going to be like this. Sales minus variable costs minus fixed costs gives you, or is equal to, the profit. So all this says is, if I start with the sales and then I subtract the variable costs, I end up with contribution, but it doesn't say that here. I subtract the variable costs and then I subtract the fixed costs as well. I end up with the profit. I think we've seen already that that is a true statement. So now in this question, or in this part of the question, if I'm looking for the selling price, I'm going to say that that is my unknown, or my x, that I'm going to try and plug into my equation and solve and find the value of. So I say let x equal the selling price, which I'm looking for. Okay, and then I start to form an equation in terms of x, and then I go and solve for x. So to write the sales figure in terms of x, well, if x is the selling price per unit, and I know how many I'm going to sell, so for instance, if I was going to sell 10 units, then the total sales figure would be 10 multiplied by the selling price, or in other words, 10x. Now in this particular question, part D here, it says, if fixed costs are increased by 10% and the volume of sales remain the same. So the volume of sales means that the number of units that you sell remains the same. In this case, 80,000 units. So if you're still selling 80,000 units and you're selling them at X euros each, then the total sales is going to be 80,000x, or 80,000 multiplied by x. That's your sales figure, minus your variable costs. Now your variable costs in total, again, are going to be 80,000 multiplied by your variable cost per unit. But we don't know the variable cost per unit yet, but we can certainly put in the 80,000 multiplied by part. But what are we going to multiply it by? Well, originally, if we go back to our original marginal costing statement, the variable cost per unit was €6.20, and that was made up of this part here, which was 5% of €11, which is 5% selling commission, 5% of sales for one unit, then the sales would be €11. So 5% of €11 is 55 cents plus 565. So in this example, again, my total variable cost per unit, if we write it in two parts, it's going to be something plus 565, because that's not going to change. But it's the 5% of the selling price that's going to change, because in this case, the selling price is not going to be, or at least we don't know if it'll be, €11. Almost certainly it's going to be something different, because we're trying to find out what it's going to be. So if it's not €11, we're not going to put 5% of 11 here, but we've already called it x. We can call it 0.05x, which is 5% of x. So this is the selling price, or sorry, the 5% of the selling price in terms of x. Okay, next thing is minus the fixed cost. Now there was an adjustment to the fixed cost in the question. It said if fixed costs are increased by 10%. So the original fixed cost, back again to our original marginal costing statement, the fixed costs were 254,000. If they increase by 10%, well, the way I do it, and I'm just going to do it down here a bit further, is I do 254,000 and I multiply it by 1.1 to get 110%. 1 for 100%, 0.1 for 10%. So 110%, that's an increase. And I'm going to pause there and get a calculator and work that out. So that worked out to be 279,400. So I'm going to say minus 279,400. That's my minus fixed costs. Equal to profit. Well, what did it say about the profit in the question? It says, and the profit remains the same. Well, that's still going to be 130,000 there. So equal to 130,000. So that's the equation we formed in terms of x. Now we just need to solve that equation in the usual way. So the first thing we're going to do is multiply out the brackets here. So it's going to be 80,000x minus, and we must watch out for our signs. A minus by a plus is a minus. So minus 80,000 by 0.05 is 4,000x. And then again, a minus by a plus is a minus, so another negative sign here. 80,000 by 5.65. Just do that quickly here. 452,000. Minus 279,400 equal to 130,000. Next step then is I'm just going to get all of the like terms, all of the terms that have x in them on one side and all of the constants or the terms without x on the other side. So 80,000x minus 4,000x is 76,000x is equal to, so 130,000 is already over on that far side, but I'm going to bring this over and it becomes a plus. I'm going to bring this over to the other side and it becomes a plus. Okay, now I'm going to run out of space is what I'm going to do, but I may do my best here. 76,000x is equal to, if I add up all three of these, so plus 130,000 plus 279,400 gives me 861,400. So going over here, I'm going to divide both sides by 76,000 to leave me with x on one side. And dividing this by 76,000 gives me 11.3342. So in this case, it's the selling price we're looking for. So it's going to be in euros or pounds, whatever it happens to be. In this case, we'll always round this off to 2 decimal places and mathematically. So we're not doing like we did earlier where we rounded up regardless of what decimal places there were. So we're going to do it mathematically. So 0.334 rounds to just 0.33. So 11.33 is the selling price.